Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, June the 19th, 2024. Happy birthday, Boris Johnson. Yes, Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister of the UK, is 60 years old. Now, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because in the UK, there are only three charismatic politicians, as far as I can see. There's Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage, and George Galloway. And both Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage turned 60 this year. So what is it about that year, 1964? What is it about Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage that makes them special? Of course, we don't really know what's going to happen with Boris Johnson. You know, I suppose there is a chance that he returns to front rank politics. I have looked at his chart in some detail before, so I don't really want to spend ages looking at what's going on with him. I do, though, want to look at his solar return very quickly. I mean, that'll give us some indication perhaps about the year ahead. But of course, right now he's not a member of Parliament. He's got other things to worry about. So, you know, maybe there's not going to be any return to politics anytime soon. But still, we should always keep an eye on Boris Johnson. Then there was Saulos Chilima. I talked about him yesterday. He's the vice president. He was the vice president of Malawi, and then he was killed in a plane crash. And I felt I didn't really give his horoscope much justice yesterday. I was more focusing on sort of Malawi and Malawi as a country and perhaps the lunation before the accident. But I did want to make an observation about his chart relating to Mars and Pluto that I kind of forgot to make yesterday. So that's something I do want to briefly look at. And then I suppose the main subject of this video is really a continuation of yesterday's video in terms of talking about vice presidential candidates. I want to look at four vice presidential candidates, potential picks, or should I put it a different way, potential Trump picks, and they are Byron Donalds, who is a congressman from Florida. He's an outsider, but some people are suggesting that he might be a possibility. J.D. Vance, who a lot of people seem to really like J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is quite courageous, it seems, in raising questions about the United States' intervention in Ukraine. And then there is Tulsi Gabbard, who, again, I think she's a bit of a dark horse. I don't think people really rate her as a real possibility to be a vice presidential candidate, but I did want to have another look at her chart. Now, on the thumbnail video, I have got these three up there, but I forgot to take off Tim Scott. I did look at Tim Scott yesterday, and Tim Scott, he's a man on the top right. I felt comparing Tim Scott, Marco Rubio, and Doug, what's his name, Bungum, or whatever his name, the governor of North Dakota, I thought that Tim Scott, of those three, was probably the better pick. But, you know, when you're dealing with these vice presidential candidates, you know, these are people who have not been known about for a long time. You know, for a long time, they're coming from relative obscurity. So suddenly we have to think about names we haven't heard of particularly. Okay, J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard have been in the news for some time. And because of they're new people, we don't have access to their times of birth. And so this whole exercise of looking at VP picks is, I'm afraid, rather unsatisfying because we don't know the time of birth. And, you know, finally, I did want to have a quick look at the Republican conference, the RNC conference, which is happening on July the 15th of this year. It's strange. It starts on July the 15th. I spent ages trying to find out what time it started. I think vendors could start selling stuff at 1 in the afternoon, but I couldn't find a time for the first speech. Maybe I just didn't look hard enough. But it's just interesting that the Republican National Congress, or is it conference, RNC, whatever it is. It starts on July the 15th. And this is at this event, the Republican Party will formally announce that Donald Trump is their pick, and of course it's expected that Donald Trump will also announce who his pick is to be his vice presidential candidate. And it's kind of interesting that July the 15th, that rings a bell, doesn't it? There's a Mars-Uranus conjunction on July the 15th. We'll be looking at that. So that's what I'm going to talk about later in this video. But first of all, I want to consider what's going on today, which is Wednesday, June the 19th, 2024. So it's not a particularly interesting day astrologically. Kind of a bit like yesterday. I thought that yesterday wasn't too interesting, you know. So I didn't say as much as usual for the 12 signs. So in fact, overall, I think it was quite a short video, well under 2 hours. So looking at the main event, well, the moon at noon New York time is on the verge of moving from Scorpio, moving into Sagittarius. In fact, at 12:30, I think it's 12:32 to be precise, in the afternoon, around lunchtime, New York time, the moon moves from Scorpio to Sagittarius. And if you're in the West Coast, that will be a bit earlier. That will be 9:32 a.m. So if you're in the Americas, by and large, it's a 50-50 day. You know, the beginning of the day, you've got the moon in Scorpio. Then last half of the day, you've got moon in Sagittarius. So in the Americas, you could experience something of a change. Moon in Scorpio, heavily emotional. Our feelings are strong, but not always strongly expressed. And, you know, many of us may just feel that things just aren't going anywhere. And then you get the moon going to Sagittarius. Things change. There's more excitement. There's action. Though, at least there's a possibility of action. Though we may not actually see the full results until tomorrow or the day after. Now, if you're in Western Europe, the moon moves into Sagittarius later, London time, 5:32 p.m. So it's more of an evening event, the moon moving through Sagittarius. If you're in other parts of the world, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, I mean, I think you should see really it as being a moon in Scorpio day, with really the moon moving into Sagittarius either late this evening or into tomorrow. Now, one thing about the sun, so the sun is at 28 Gemini, very close to the solstice now. We're almost there. The longest day in the northern hemisphere was almost with us. Shortest day, of course, if you're in the southern hemisphere. And it is on a fixed star, Betelgeuse. I believe Betelgeuse is a hand of Orion. Now, the meanings of fixed stars, I don't generally have that to hand. I mean, I can't automatically tell you what it really means for the sun to be conjunct Betelgeuse. But turning to Vivian Robeson, the fixed stars and constellations in astrology, he says that Betelgeuse is an irregularly variable orange star situated on the right shoulder of Orion. It is from the Arabic, meaning Ibut al-Jawza, the armpit of the central one, or giant, but meaning, according to Bullinger, the coming of the branch. Is that right? Maybe I got that wrong. The hand of Orion. That seems to be another part of Orion, shoulder of Orion, perhaps. According to Ptolemy, it is of the nature of Mars and Mercury. It gives martial honour, preferment and wealth. And Robeson says about the sun, interest in and ability for occult and mystical subjects, acute diseases, fevers, honour and preferment, ending in final ruin. So Betelgeuse is an exciting influence. It can allow us to make our presence felt. We can get recognition for what we are doing. But there seems to be a warning that we mustn't take it too far. That one moment we are recognised, and the next moment we're in real trouble. It reminds us of Boris Johnson, doesn't it? I don't know whether Boris Johnson has Sun on Betelgeuse in his chart. He probably does have it pretty close. I mean, it's his birthday, isn't it? So that would seem to work for Boris Johnson. From hero to zero. I mean, certainly that's my opinion of him. I quite like Boris Johnson up to a point, but from my perspective, what he did with Ukraine is completely unforgivable. But other people are more concerned about Partygate and whatever. But his reputation has been really trashed. But there was a time when he was up there. When he was really an incredible figure in British politics. So maybe the story of Boris Johnson illustrates how Betelgeuse may work when you've got the sun on this star. And aside from sun on Betelgeuse, there's really not much else to report. The moon is, it's making an opposition to Uranus. You'll feel that opposition to Uranus, especially if you're in Europe, Asia, Australia, New Zealand. I don't think if you're in the Americas, moon opposition Uranus, you're not going to really feel that. But moon opposition Uranus can bring a little bit of instability, particularly at the beginning of the day. People getting stubborn, not being prepared to compromise. What we also have, that as the moon changes sign, it makes a sextile to Pluto. So that sextile to Pluto is quite a gentle influence, but it does allow us to maybe make a few changes. There is the question of transformation, but subtle transformations that perhaps we don't really see on the surface, but they are happening, and transformations that are sort of helped along by our talents or by other people's talents. Turning to the heliocentric picture. Here's the heliocentric picture. Where is it? So again, Earth is at 2851 Sagittarius. Earth is always exactly opposition the Sun. And we have Mars is now moving away from a conjunction to Neptune, so I don't think we're really feeling that very much. So I don't think there's a lot going on here from a heliocentric perspective. Could you say that the Aries point is sort of on the Mars-Neptune midpoint? I mean, Neptune is still something to worry about. The heliocentric Aries point fairly close to the Mars-Neptune midpoint. Yeah, I mean, there's always a possibility of pursuing things that are not helpful, and we might get ourselves into trouble. And I suppose there's also a reminder that we've got, as I've just said, we've got Sun on Betelgeuse. And with the Sun on Betelgeuse, we can get praise. If we want it, it's available, but we might take things too far. So a bit of caution there might be required, but I don't think the heliocentric picture is particularly interesting. But I think we do need to keep looking at it just to remind ourselves of how the solar system is unfolding from a heliocentric view. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is the fact that, yes, the moon is moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius. And as it moves from Scorpio to Sagittarius, it makes a trine to Neptune. Let me just show you that. So there's the moon, 29 Scorpio at around noon on in New York, and so it's making making the trine to Neptune. So that trine to Neptune, I suppose it's nice in a way. It's sensitive. It's in water signs. We might get information quite unexpectedly without really having to try. And maybe I'm thinking about the kind of information we pick up on sort of a sort of a psychic and a spiritual level. So if you are psychic, or you are very sort of intuitive and emotional, yeah, there's lots to pick up. But don't get confused by it, because I think with Moon trine Neptune, we could easily be overwhelmed by what is coming our way. Okay, so let me now look at the 12 signs. Just a warning here that there is not much going on today. Some of my interpretations and forecasts may be a bit on the brief side, but it's just the way it is. I mean, there's no point in me just talking for the sake of it, although I kind of think that sometimes I do talk for the sake of it, but that's something I should try to avoid. Okay, so these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, June the 19th, 2024. Aries. It's a day of changeover. I think that recently, Aries, you have been not really quite yourself. You've been a little bit introspective, and as far as you're concerned, the world has been a complicated place. There's been a lot to consider, a lot to worry about, and you've perhaps realized for the first time that things aren't as simple as they seem. And because things have not been simple, they have taken more effort, more time, and actually, Aries, you may have been more cautious than usual. Now, if you are an Aries in East Asia, Australia, New Zealand, then there may be a certain amount of instability over the course of the day. And this is because the moon is opposition Uranus. You might be encountering stubborn people who refuse to compromise, and you yourself might feel tense, as if just something has to happen and you're not happy with the way things are going, and you just really want to push things forward. I would suggest that you're patient and you sort of wait the day out. Now, if you are in other parts of the world, if you're in the Americas in particular, the moon does move into Sagittarius. So last half of the day in the Americas, in fact, most of the day if you're in California, and Hawaii, Alaska, the moon will be in Sagittarius. And so that's a big change, the moon moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius. If you're in Europe, then this evening you're going to get moon in Sagittarius. So what I'm saying will apply for a smaller window. But with the moon moving into Sagittarius, I think that you might feel a sense of freedom. That a lot of your concerns will start to dissipate, and you can be more relaxed, and I think at the same time less bored. There'll be more opportunities, and you'll perhaps start to see the world in a new way, and you won't be so restricted. And as the moon moves into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile with Pluto, and that sextile to Pluto will make you realize that you can have an influence. People will listen to you, and if you want change, particularly social change, then you can make it happen, but in such a way that you won't cause too much offense. People will say, yes, yes, you're the right person. You can provide a certain amount of excitement and perhaps leadership as well. Though, do sort of pair your expectations. It's just starting. Moon moving from Scorpio into Scorpio into Sagittarius, some people are going to take a long time to warm up. They may feel a bit sort of reptilian. I mean, I'm not saying that you're going to be reptilian. You may feel that other people are sort of reptilian, like snakes warming up on a rock in the morning. I don't know. I've never seen a snake warming up on a rock in the morning. I've just heard that that's kind of what they do. So people will be a bit slow. And you can't expect them to respond immediately. Just slowly work your magic. But in the end, I think people will warm up, and you can perhaps end the day on quite a fun note, especially if you're in Europe and the Americas. Further east, maybe we're talking more about tomorrow. Taurus. You have perhaps, in some respects, had enough of other people. That's maybe how it feels. Surely you do understand the influence that other people are having on you, but at the same time, you're thinking that it's too much of a good thing. You want to be in control of your own life, and you can see the many ways in which you are being influenced, the many ways in which you are not in control of your life. And so, with the moon moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius, you may feel that this is time to sort of reassert yourself, to claim back your freedom. But try not to exaggerate. I mean, I think that when people complain about having their freedom restricted by outside forces, to an extent it is about their own perceptions and their own emotions and their own projections. Very often if we can't do something because of our own internal reasons, we want to blame other people. That's just human nature. There's nothing wrong with it, but that's the way people are. So I'm suggesting that you don't entirely give up on other people. You instead have to, set up your stall. You have to say who you are, what you want, explain yourself, and just be nice without compromising anything. And with that kind of approach, I think, Taurus, you can get quite a lot of favourable attention. You can get people to like you. It may not be easy to get new people to like you, to make connections with new people. It may not be easy, but I think as soon as people realise who you are and what you stand for, I think that they will start to gravitate around you. And I think you're going to be helped by your sensitivity. I mean, I know that Taurus sometimes doesn't have a reputation for being wildly sensitive. It can just focus on surface appearances and not really look at what's going on emotionally. And I'm saying this as someone with Taurus rising, that you can just focus on material things and not material surface impressions without really looking at what's going on under the surface. And I think there's some danger of that today, but at the same time, the moon is making a trine to Neptune. And so I think with that moon trine Neptune does give you the possibility of getting insights into other people and their emotions and the way they are and their preferences. And these insights could actually be very useful and could allow you to really ingratiate yourself with them without having to give anything away. Now, as the day progresses, I think that Taurians do become more powerful. That's particularly once the moon moves into Sagittarius. So moon into Sagittarius, that's about last half of the day in the Americas. This evening, if you're in Europe, and parts of Africa, but maybe tomorrow if you're in East Asia, Australia. But still, wherever you are, the moon is making a sextile to Pluto. And I think that this sextile to Pluto is going to allow you to really decide what is important. And that is especially going to matter if you're in a high profile situation, or if you're working. So I suppose realistically, if you're working, it would probably more cover the Americas from other parts of the world. But you're able to project what you want without saying anything. It will just be clear what you want, and you can do it in a sort of fairly effortless way. Fairly effortless, not entirely effortless. A little bit of skill may be required, but I think that you're going to be able to slowly and successfully establish your identity and your desires, and I think people will understand it. And so I think for many Taurians, I think the day should end on quite a fortunate note, and I think in general the day should end better than it starts. Gemini, there may be a couple of things that need to be finished off, so don't be in too much of a hurry. You may be in the middle of something, and being a Gemini, you can often find that you finish things halfway through. I'm saying it as someone with Sun in Gemini. You almost get there, but you don't quite get there. There's so many books I've finished when I got so many books that I read. I got to almost the end of the book and I didn't quite finish it, and just so close. An important book that I really should have read, and I'm really so close to the finishing line, and I just stopped reading right at the end. And I do that. I don't know about you, but it's so important that you finish what you're doing. I don't know, you could get distracted right at the last moment when you are very close to the finishing line. So do see it through. And once you've seen it through, then you can move on. And this is, it's all about the moon moving from Scorpio into Sagittarius. This happens late morning, lunchtime if you're in the Americas, happens this evening if you're in Europe, tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But with the moon moving into Sagittarius, things do change. I think that you become more optimistic. I think you become more positive, and to an extent I think you become a nicer person. I think you become someone who is easier to deal with, and people will have, I think, a greater sympathy for you. Though from your perspective you may have to compromise a little. You do have to sort of understand what people want, what people don't want. I mean, I think you can do this. I mean, I don't think it's a big problem. I don't think you're going to have to give much away. And once you understand people, and once you get an idea about what their dislikes are, and as well as their likes, I suppose, you're in a better position to assert control. It's like if you want to lead, you have to follow. If you want to create or be creative, you have to respond in the first instance. And I think that Gemini, you can handle this very well. But by understanding people and by being sympathetic to them, you can turn things round and start to have an influence. And people will, I think, listen to you. And your ideas will sound interesting. After all, the moon is making a sextile to Pluto. It's a gently transformative influence. And I'm fairly confident that you can actually have quite a big influence, and You can perhaps show a side to yourself that you don't normally show. You can be sympathetic, and you can demonstrate that you are a nice person, and some of your Gemini rough edges, for one reason or another, won't show themselves. And so, yeah, so you can ingratiate yourself with people, and it won't be painful. You won't really be giving too much away, and so that looks good. Now, I should also point out that the sun is about to leave your sign. This happens really soon. I mean, the sun is in the last degree of Gemini. So this reinforces what I said right at the beginning of this piece, is that something needs to be finished, and maybe there are opportunities which you need to take advantage of now. Maybe there have been opportunities that have been lying around, ignored, and you haven't picked up on them, you haven't been bothered, you've forgotten about them. Well, maybe this is the last chance. So if there's something you've been meaning to take advantage of, but you haven't, I would suggest that you do it now. If you wait a couple of days, you might actually have missed your chance. So for some Geminis, swift, even urgent action might be required. Cancer. It's a day when the moon changes sign. It changes sign from Scorpio to Sagittarius. And so it does depend on time zone. And I do understand that some people do get a little bit irritated when I talk about time zones. And I mentioned this yesterday, that, but the reality is that different people are experiencing what's going on astrologically in different ways depending on their time zone. This is the issue with this kind of astrology. So if you are in the Americas, then around lunchtime or even earlier, the moon will change sign. It will move into Sagittarius. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon will not move into Sagittarius until tomorrow. So it does depend on your time zone in terms of what today is going to be like. And it's one of those days when we do have to consider time zones, especially for Cancerians, because the moon is your ruler, and the moon is very fast. And so if you are, if you're in the Americas, you can certainly start to see today in terms of a changeover happening around lunchtime, the moon moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius, and that is a big change. So I think you quite enjoyed the moon being in Scorpio, because the moon is in a water sign. It's a place where you feel comfortable, even though the moon is in the sign of, its fall. Moon in Scorpio, it's fallen in Scorpio. Remember, it's exalted in Taurus, so it's fallen in Scorpio. So with the moon moving through the last degrees of Scorpio, it just may feel that it was a time when you could just be yourself, do things your own way, be quietly satisfied with the way things were going, especially if you can ignore other people. Yeah, some people might be a problem. After all, the moon is making an opposition to Uranus. That could be other people making a fuss, being ridiculously stubborn. But if you could get through that, it was all very relaxing and easy. And then we have the moon moving into Sagittarius. So last half of the day, Cancer, if you're in the Americas. This evening, if you're in Europe. Tomorrow, if you're in Australia or New Zealand. So with the moon moving into Sagittarius, that is a change. And it's a change which is kind of contradictory. You've got the moon moving into a fire sign, so you are feeling more positive in a way. You're feeling that something has to be done. You're not entirely happy with the way things are, and things have to change because the moon is in Sagittarius is a mutable sign. So with the moon in a mutable sign, you can't stay in one place for too long because you feel that something has to move. It's like with fire. Fire can't stay in one place or it goes out. It has to keep moving to find more fuel. And that may be how you feel. But at the same time, you feel that the world in which you're living in is not perfect, that it has to, as far as is humanly possible, be made more perfect. And so you might end up having to move from place to place, trying to sort things out, make things right, fix things, sort out various messes. And that can be quite exhausting, feeling that it's all down to you. And I think that is perhaps the biggest problem with the moon in Sagittarius for Cancerians. Just feeling that no one's helping. Though the moon, when it does move into Sagittarius, it does make a sextile to Pluto. And I think that Pluto is perhaps providing you with a way out, or at least a solution. So if you feel that you're alone, that you're having to do too much, that you're overwhelmed, that moon sextile Pluto gives you a solution. And that solution may be finding a way to pressurize other people into giving you the assistance you need. You can somehow transform things. You can maybe create a sense of urgency. So don't feel the urgency yourself. I think there might be a sense of urgency, but it's all got to be sorted out. But you take this urgency and you push it onto other people. I think today you can make people nervous. And if you can make people nervous, then you have an opportunity for changing their behaviors. And if they're nervous, you can sort of manipulate them into doing things your way. Leo. Well, the sun is on Betelgeuse, and I think you might feel that. So with the sun on Betelgeuse, you perhaps may get more attention than usual. You may get praise. You may actually have a great sense of your own power and what you can achieve. But you have to stop for a moment, because with the sun on Betelgeuse, there is a danger that you overdo it. You perhaps have an advantage and you push it too far. And once you push the advantage too far, it all turns against you. So you've got to be realistic and you've got to know when to stop. So that is really important. Though I'm not saying that it's going to be a bad day. I don't think it need be a bad day at all, especially as the moon is changing sign from Scorpio and into Sagittarius. So with the moon changing sign, it actually is a time when you can be more constructive, more positive, more creative. I don't think that from a Leo perspective, the moon in Scorpio has been great. You know, you're just being too focused on yourself, on your own needs and your own worries, and the moon in Scorpio can just get very stuck if you're a Leo. But as the moon moves from Scorpio into Sagittarius, things start to move. And so you will feel things moving, even even if the moon doesn't move into Sagittarius today, like if you're in Australia or New Zealand, I think you can still feel the change. And the reason for this is that the moon is making a trine to Neptune. So as it moves out of Scorpio, it makes that trine to Neptune. And there just may be a feeling that things that you were taking really seriously, but you thought were super important, they just lose their importance, and you start to think about other things, and you do become more relaxed. And then the moon moves into Sagittarius, whether it happens today or tomorrow, you just suddenly recognize that there are more opportunities out there. And with the moon moving into a fire sign, remember Leo is a fire sign, you feel a greater sympathy and greater understanding with what's happening in the world. And I think this is a reminder perhaps of what the problem has been. So fairly recently, Mars was moving through Aries. Aries is a fire sign. There was fire in the sky. And as a Leo, having that fire is important. But now, the last couple of weeks, there's been no fire in the sky. Okay, the moon has every now and then gone into a fire sign, but then it moves out, and it just feels that there's nothing happening. And where is the spark? But moon is moving into Sagittarius. It gives you the spark back. And being a fire sign, that spark is really important to you. And once you get your spark back, then you're able to focus on things again. I don't know. I think there was. I don't know if you saw that film, that '60s film with was it Performance with Mick Jagger, and I think there's a line in that film. It's a long time since I've seen this film, but of course Mick Jagger is a Leo. But Mick Jagger was I think he was playing not quite playing himself, but playing some sort of rock star who was trying to escape from it all. And there was this phrase in Performance about lost your demon. It was suggested to Mick Jagger that perhaps he'd lost his demon, or the character Mick Jagger was playing, losing your demon. And maybe this is relevant. Maybe you have felt recently that you have lost your demon. And okay, sun on Betelgeuse, maybe something a little bit demonic about Betelgeuse, seems quite heavy energy there. But with the moon moving into Leo, you may feel that you're rediscovering your demon. And of course I'm using the word demon in a positive sense. And so once you've rediscovered your demon, with the moon moving into Leo, particularly as the moon is making a sextile to Pluto, you can start making things happen. Yeah, you'll get your spark back. Virgo. I think, Virgo, that you are not entirely comfortable with the way things are going. You do value your space, and I think today your space is going to be important to you, and I don't think that you're going to be especially in the mood for wild activity. You just won't be in the mood. And maybe it's just a sign that you feel that things are winding down. And we have also got the sun changing sign. The sun is about to change sign. The sun doesn't change sign. I think it's tomorrow with the solstice. The sun moves out of Gemini into Cancer. But you yourself, maybe you feel a bit overwhelmed. Maybe you feel just a little bit exhausted, that you've done what you can, and now you just want to sort of fade into the background. And I think that is okay. It's nothing to apologize about. And just because you're fading into the background, just because your presence is not being as strongly felt as it used to be, it doesn't mean that in any sense you are losing your power. You are not. In fact, you are at your most powerful when no one can see you. I suppose that's because you're feeling comfortable, you're feeling relaxed, you're not feeling pressurized, and that allows you to have an influence. And, I suppose it's not just the sun about to move from Gemini to Cancer. It's also the fact that the moon is moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius. Now, you might think moon moving into Sagittarius is quite an exciting thing because the moon is in Sagittarius. It's a fun, fiery sign. But from a Virgo view, Sagittarius is a sign that is really at the bottom of the chart. It's a sign which is connected with the home and family and the sacred half. And that's where you are. That's where you should be. That's where you are moving. And once you are in a secure environment where everything is comfortable and you're not being pressurized, then actually you can start to apply the pressure. Because when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile to Pluto. So moon sextile Pluto is about you being able to have an influence. And you can have an influence in a way that doesn't require much effort on your part. You just be yourself, and you quietly make it clear what you want, how you want the world to be. You don't have to necessarily tell anyone what you want, how you want the world to be. It's more of a private sense of what you like things to be. And if you can organize your immediate domestic home environment, organize it how you like, how you want it to be, then that organization can be reflected out there. I suppose it's sort of as above, so below, but maybe so below as above, or rather, the way you organize things in your own private way from below, the world out there will start to conform to that. So it's kind of the opposite of what we normally think. We normally think that we've got these huge energies out there in the cosmos and we have to fit into them. But it could work both ways. We do things our way, and okay, the cosmos is not going to do things exactly our way. It doesn't work like that quite, but one reflects the other. So if your little world is all in order, then the world out there is going to be all in order, and they're going to reflect each other. And that is going to give you a sense of comfort, and also, I think, a sense of your own power. And people will recognize this sense of quiet power. And I think in many cases they will respect you for it. Libra. I do think that things are moving for you in a fairly quiet kind of way, at least to begin with. So, the moon is moving through the last degrees of Scorpio, getting ready to move into Sagittarius. And I think that, with the moon late Scorpio, you may feel that things haven't really been happening, certainly not at the speed with which you'd like them to happen. So there may be a certain sense of boredom, what's going to happen next. Though as the moon moves through late Scorpio, I think that you're going to get some useful insights, and these insights may be about money and how you should deal with money, and you always have to be careful with insights because insights can be wrong. So insights always have to be checked. But you might get an insight about the way money is being used, or the way your money is being used, how you are managing your money, or how other people are managing their money. And these insights could be useful, though you should perhaps do some investigation to check your hunches, to make sure your hunches really are correct. So the moon does change sign. Okay, it changes sign tomorrow if you're in the Americas, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but by and large, moon is changing sign from Scorpio into Sagittarius. And I think if you're a Libran, that is welcome. With the moon moving into Sagittarius, you find it easier to be open and at the same time relaxed and able to deal with excitement, on your terms. And there's certainly more things to say. And at the same time, you're going to feel that people are going to be listening to you more. And that might have been a problem over the last couple of days. You might have felt that you had something to say, but maybe no one was prepared to listen to you, or perhaps things were just too emotional, because things have been getting a bit emotional astrologically, because, we've had Venus, your ruler, moving into Cancer, a very emotional sign. We've had Mercury, of course, moving into Cancer, and we've had the moon in Scorpio. And, with this moon in Scorpio, there have been things going on, but you just haven't really been able to fully express it. And this is applied to many areas of your life, just including things like, career, work, business. Things were just too intense, and you just did get a feeling that things were being hidden, or that people were not really able to express themselves properly. But now things are changing. Moon is moving into Sagittarius, and I think that you're going to find that it's really much easier to get noticed. And if you've got a quirk, if you've got something that makes you different, we all have something that makes us different, but if you've got something very, very individual to you, and you really want to be noticed for it, you will get noticed now. People are going to pay attention to you, and people will start to realize how special you are. Though to an extent, it is up to you. You've got to make an effort to talk about the things that are important to you, to communicate the things that are important to you. I suppose you can't expect other people to be mind readers. You've got to give them something. But if you give them something, they will take notice of it, and they will accept that you've got something important to offer. Though we shouldn't forget that there is a Mercury-Venus conjunction in Cancer. Now, this Mercury-Venus conjunction was exact a few days ago. It's not exact anymore. It is separating to an extent, but I don't think so far this week you've been able to fully take advantage of this Mercury-Venus conjunction. And I think that has been because the moon has been in Scorpio. That Mercury-Venus conjunction was about, you as someone who was clever, had things to say, was also being very creative, but you just didn't have the space. You didn't have the opportunity to really tell the world what you could do. And certainly if you were working over the last few days, you may have just felt you were just being a little bit ignored, or rather that there was never an opportunity to be yourself. But anyway, that's now changing because the moon is in Sagittarius, and I know that it might sound rather contrary to have Venus and Mercury in Cancer, and the moon in Sagittarius, that might seem Sagittarius and Cancer don't really seem to link up with each other. There seems to be a mismatch between Sagittarius and Cancer. But I think in this case, it is a real match because the moon in Sagittarius is going to allow you to communicate the potential that is intrinsic to that Mercury-Venus conjunction in Cancer, which really does reflect you. And I think that people really will take you seriously, and they will listen to you. If you've got something to say, then I think that you will get an audience. Though, don't expect anyone to really be motivated. A lot of people are very unmotivated today. They just seem sluggish. Maybe it's because they're just comfortable in whatever situation they're in. It's a comfort zone. They're happy where they are, and they don't want to make changes. And you might regard that as being a bit of a shame. But what matters is having some kind of conversation, being able to talk about what you want to do. You will get an enthusiastic response, at least verbally. The action will have to come later. So, Libra, don't be too impatient. And in terms of close relationships, the people you know and perhaps love, the people you're with them all the time, don't have too many expectations. They're going to come up with all sorts of excuses why they can't move from A to B. At the same time, some people may actually be trying to persist with a situation which is actually finished. It's done. It's gone. It's dead. But some people just are going to persist with it. And you might find it rather irritating, especially with the moon moving into Sagittarius. This is time to move on. But some people just don't want to move on. You may feel that you need to give them a push, but I don't think that's appropriate. I think you have to allow people to just work things out in their own way. And when people are ready to move on, they will. So perhaps that's something you'll start to see over the next day or two, but not today itself. So don't be too impatient with other people. You do what you can, but you can only do so much. Scorpio. Moon is moving out of your sign, which I suppose is a bit of a mixed blessing. With the moon moving through Scorpio, you have felt in a way that you were at home, that you were in a situation that you felt comfortable in. But at the same time, it might be starting to feel a little stagnant. There are other things going on out there, and you want to engage with it all. And so with Moon moving into Sagittarius, that could give you an opportunity to move things on, especially in terms of anything to do with money. Because as the moon moves into Sagittarius, remember that happens sort of lunchtime, maybe even earlier in the Americas, later in the day in Europe, perhaps tomorrow, Australia, New Zealand. But as the moon moves into Sagittarius, you have ideas in terms of money, and you also have the opportunity to make changes, because moon in Sagittarius will also make a sextile to Pluto. And so if there's something of foundational importance, you can challenge it. So, some people are just taking things for granted. They want things done in a particular way. They're getting used to money coming in a particular way, and that's perhaps something you need to challenge. And so look at your finances and perhaps look at other people's finances if you have the opportunity, and consider ways in which people may be taking things for granted. Though don't be too stuck in your own ways, because you're somewhat conflicted. Yes, you would like to create change. You feel that change is something that you would like to enact. But from a psychological perspective, there's a lot you're holding on to. You're holding on not just to things about yourself, but also about other people. You have ideas about other people and theories about other people. And even if the evidence is challenging those theories, you still want to hold on to it. And so it's going to be difficult to treat people as real individuals, changing individuals. But it does seem that something is going on, and you're one step behind. So give this some thought, Scorpio. How are people changing? How is the various relationships you're involved in? Are you being realistic? Perhaps you're expecting that things will just keep on going as they always have done, when in reality things are moving and you don't want to be left behind. And I suppose with the moon moving into Sagittarius, this is the first opportunity, Scorpio, to start to make changes, and those changes, I think, need to happen firstly with you yourself. You have to change. You have to change your attitude, and you perhaps have to understand how other people have changed, because actually they've changed quite a lot, and you can't perhaps treat them as you had treated them, until very recently. So Scorpio, that is something to think about. And in terms of close relationships, you don't fully know what's going on in terms of the way people are perceiving the future and what they want. And people are creating plans, and they are seeing opportunities, and they're not really communicating them. And you may actually be surprised if you were able to tap into someone's mind and tap into someone's aspirations. You'd be surprised at what you might see. So what can you do? I think if you know someone really well and you've been with them for a long time, try to get them to talk about how they see the world and what their ambitions for the future are. It may strike you as being obvious, but it's not obvious. And when you hear someone talking about their hopes for the future and their ambitions, you might actually be quite surprised. Sagittarius, good news, I think. The moon is moving into your sign. The moon has been in Scorpio for the last couple of days, and I don't think that has been great. I mean, I'm not saying it's been bad, but moon moving through Scorpio has been a time when you just may have felt that you weren't quite yourself, that you had to hold things back, and there may have been a sense in which you felt that it was important to be secretive. You perhaps you thought that if you were to tell everyone everything, you might get yourself into trouble, or maybe your confidences would be betrayed. But it's okay. The moon is moving out of Scorpio, and as the moon moves out of Scorpio, I think you could get some really very powerful insights, because the moon is making a trine aspect to Neptune. So the moon, right at the end of Scorpio, makes this trine to Neptune, which is right at the end of Pisces. And this moon trine Neptune is quite informative. Information comes your way. It's information. You don't really quite know how the information got there, why the information is coming to you, but it's coming thick and fast, and you just have to listen to the information. You don't have to make decisions on the basis of it, but you're starting to see the picture, the full picture, and then the moon moves into Sagittarius. And when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile to Pluto, and suddenly Sagittarius, things are happening. You feel that you've got your power back, and you feel that people are going to be listening to you again. You know, maybe you felt a little bit ignored recently, but now people are going to be able to listen. People will listen to you, and if they're not listening to you, I think you'll know how to get them to pay attention to you. And you're helped by the fact that Jupiter, which is your ruler, Jupiter is on some really useful midpoints. Jupiter is on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. It was on the Mercury-Mars midpoint yesterday. It's still there. And Jupiter is also on the Venus-Mars midpoint. So if you think about it, you've got a Mercury-Venus conjunction in early Cancer. You've got Mars at 7 or 8 Taurus, and Jupiter, your ruler, is right between that, is right on the midpoint. And because of that, Sagittarius, you actually have a lot of power. Firstly, you're able to get your message across with a certain amount of violence if need be. I mean, I don't mean violence in a destructive way, just violence is energetic, real action. Your words are expressed with force. Also, Jupiter is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. So with Jupiter on the Venus-Mars midpoint, you are actually charismatic and attractive, and people notice you. You're certainly not ignored. And so if you feel that you want to do something or say something, you just have to start speaking, start acting. People will immediately listen to you, and that does give you a big opportunity. Now, that doesn't mean to say, though, that you have to be completely obnoxious, throw your weight around. That's not about that. That with Jupiter on Venus-Mars midpoint, it's about charisma. It's about it's about being able to get your way without actually having to use any force. Just the power of your personality, the power of your words is enough. So, Sagittarius, what are you going to do with this? Well, it's kind of up to you. So what would you like to achieve? What is wrong with the world, and how would you like the world to be? And of course, be realistic. And how would you like people to treat you? How would you like people to behave? Answer those questions, and then really make it happen. And in terms of one-to-one relationships, this is a time in general with Jupiter moving through Gemini, which is your opposite sign. It's a time in general when relationships are important. Okay, some people are not helpful, but there are people who really are useful and who you need to get on your side. And today, with Jupiter on the Venus-Mars midpoint, you're attractive, you're charismatic. If there's someone you want to impress, now is your chance. And it shouldn't take too much effort. So overall, Sagittarius, I think things really are improving. Yes, the moon is going to be in Scorpio at the beginning of the day. Okay, it might be in Scorpio all day if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but that shouldn't be a problem. The moon is eventually going to move into Sagittarius at a time when Jupiter is incredibly well configured. So, of all the 12 signs, I would have said that things are looking best for Sagittarians. So really make the most of it. Capricorn. Okay, Capricorn, you feel that things are beginning to slow down, or should be slowing down. I think that's important to you. You can see what's happening around you, and you're not entirely satisfied with it, and you maybe feel that it's time for a break. Moon is starting to move into Sagittarius. I mean, the importance of Sagittarius is that Sagittarius is the sign immediately before Capricorn. So when the moon is in Sagittarius, it's a time when you don't really feel inclined to do much or to be out there making things happen. Maybe you can let other people make things happen. But as far as you're concerned, you do value your own space. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Though, of course, there are limits here. Venus and Mercury are in Cancer, which is your opposite sign. And so with Venus and Mercury moving through Cancer, you do understand there are certain situations where you have to take into account other people's needs and opinions. And, in a couple of days' time, in fact, I think tomorrow is the summer solstice. And with the summer solstice, you have the sun moving out of Gemini into Cancer. So that's another planet moving into Cancer, your opposite sign. And so with this potential for social pressure building up, I suppose you need to take advantage of any opportunity you can to be in your own space. And I think that's something that you perhaps need to concentrate on. Do respect yourself, and if you're not being pressurized by the outside world, just be thankful and just enjoy the space. And that is important. But I'm not saying you're powerless. Yesterday I mentioned the fact that Saturn, which is your ruler, is conjunct the Mars-Pluto midpoint. And Saturn is still conjunct the Mars-Pluto midpoint. I think it's actually even more conjunct the Mars-Pluto midpoint than it was yesterday. So that gives you power if need be. But Saturn on the Mars-Pluto midpoint is about using power in quite a dramatic but quite grueling, grinding kind of way. You can decide you don't like something, and you just make it clear you don't like something. You make a little bit of a performance about it, and people, for sure, they listen to you. So you have control. So if there's anything around you you don't like, yeah, sure, you can stop it. But that's a power which you don't want to exercise if it's not necessary. And it may just be, Capricorn, enough to know that you have the power. That should give you confidence, and that should give you security. And having the knowledge that you have that power, that is symbolized by Saturn conjunct Mars, Pluto, just may be enough. And you don't necessarily have to exercise that power. And I do think that over the next day or two, in general, people are going to leave you alone, I think. If you want to be left alone, if you tell the world that you want to be left alone, and that's what you want, then I do think that should happen. Though bear in mind, solstice is coming up. That is an important time for Capricorns. It probably is unwise to be entirely alone, because I think soon there are going to be people that it's probably best that you engage with. But for the moment, if you want to have a low profile, that's great. As far as close relationships are concerned, the kind of relationship that is just always there, then there might be a few changes with the moon moving from Scorpio into Sagittarius. So, while the moon was in Scorpio, you may have felt that some people were not being entirely honest with you. I don't mean as in dishonest, that they just weren't fully revealing themselves and they weren't being open. But with moon in Sagittarius, even though Sagittarius is quite a low profile sign from a Capricorn view, with the moon in Sagittarius, you may find that a couple of people, particularly people close to you, are being more open and upfront from usual. Now, at first sight, that might not be something you're comfortable with, but if you do feel that someone is looking for attention, someone you care about wants attention, wants to say something, wants to do something interesting, then give them the opportunity, because I think they would very much appreciate it. Aquarius, you still feel that something is missing, that you feel that something needs to be presented and you haven't fully been able to present it. So that is like you have a view of the world, you have an understanding about the way the world should be, and I think you're not entirely convinced that anyone is listening to you. Well, things are changing. I think that, in fact, Aquarius, recently you've made perhaps more progress than you give yourself credit for. People have been paying attention to you. You might not have felt that they were paying attention to you, but they were. And I think that they did appreciate what you were doing, what you're trying to do. And I think that today and sort of tomorrow, as the moon moves into Sagittarius, moves out of Scorpio into Sagittarius, I think that you'll have a greater appreciation of this, and you will you'll realize how much people like you, and also you're going to find that other people are more exciting, and so I think it's going to be easier to engage with with other people at a social level, and you'll be helped by the fact that the moon is making a sextile to Pluto. So moon sextile Pluto is quite a nice aspect. It's about changing things, but not in a way that is especially violent or disruptive. And with moon sextile Pluto, particularly towards the end of the day, I think it would be a good idea to talk to people, listen to what they have to say, and then tell them what's on your mind. And I think then you can start to sort of gently change things. But the moon sextile Pluto may also be about your hopes for the future, and how those hopes for the future are actually changing. And you may find that what you wanted, say, a week ago is not actually what you want now. Things really have changed, and do be aware of that. And so, some of your plans might also have to be changed. If you don't want something anymore, and it was desperately important to you a few days ago, then yeah, you're going to have to change your plans, and you're going to have to tell people that something really has shifted. So it is subtle. I'm not saying that you have to do anything mega dramatic. Well, I suppose, Aquarius, you could be mega dramatic if you wanted to be. Saturn is your ruler, and Saturn is conjunct the Mars-Pluto midpoint. So with Saturn conjunct the Mars-Pluto midpoint, Aquarians have the opportunity, like they had yesterday, to really make big changes, to really force something through. So I suppose, Aquarius, if there's something that you're really absolutely not happy about, that makes you angry even, then yeah, sure, you can completely change it. It doesn't have to be a gentle change as suggested by Moon sextile Pluto. It can be a dramatic change as suggested by Saturn on the Mars-Pluto midpoint, forcing people to sit up and listen, changing not just your own schedule and your own life, but also changing other people's lives and schedules. But do you really need to do that? I think there could, though, be a financial element to this. If you see something of a financial nature that really bothers you, then now might be a time when you can address the issue, and you will be able to address the issue with conviction and power, and people will listen to you. Maybe even organizations will listen to you, and through your persistence you can really change things around. And I think in the long term, or even the mid-term, you can really make financial improvements. Okay, it might be at someone else's expense, but if you feel that it's important, then yes, I think that's something you can do. Pisces. Jupiter is your ruler, and Jupiter is doing some interesting things, which I was explaining to Sagittarius, because Sagittarius, like Pisces, has Jupiter as its ruler. So Jupiter is on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and it's on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. And these midpoints are quite verbal. They're also very charismatic. So it's not a time when you need to be ignored. If you don't want to be ignored, you don't have to be ignored. And I do think that you're going to be able to make your presence felt. And these midpoints, they are direct. So we've got, in the jargon, we've got Mars and Jupiter are approximately 32 degrees. How far apart are they? They are Mars and Jupiter are approximately 28 degrees apart, and Mercury and Venus, particularly Venus, is about 20 degrees apart from Jupiter. So that means that Jupiter is on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and it's also on the Mars-Mercury midpoint. So it's direct, and this means that you can say it as it is, with force. People will listen. You don't have to be polite. I think you will be polite, actually, in terms of how you are perceived, but you don't have to try to be polite. Just do what feels right. And once you start talking, even people will listen, and I think in the main you will get your way. And additionally, Jupiter is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. Venus-Mars is all about attraction, desirability, and so you come over as a charismatic, attractive person, but also someone who is quite stabilizing. People are going to like having you around. You can bring things down to earth. And so really make an effort here to get people to like you, because I think they will like you, and I think that they will regard you as being important. And while this is going on, the moon is moving into Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is a high-profile sign from your perspective. It's at the top of the chart, and so with the moon moving into Sagittarius, it's a time when you can really get attention. Okay, that depends to an extent on what your time zone is. If you're in Hawaii, for example, or Alaska, then moon is going to be in Sagittarius for pretty much most of the day. If you're in New York, it's going to be the last half of the day. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it's going to be more about tomorrow. But one way or another, the moon is moving into Sagittarius, and so when the moon moves into Sagittarius, you're going to have the opportunity to really project yourself and your ideas and the fact that you are an exciting person who has got something to offer. So overall, Pisces, there's a lot happening today, and I think to an extent tomorrow as well, because tomorrow the moon will be fully in Sagittarius, regardless of your time zone. So Pisces, really make a special effort to take advantage of all of this stuff going on. The 12 signs. I don't give star ratings for the signs. Actually, I did give star ratings when I first started doing these 12 sign forecasts. But if I were to give any two signs 5 stars for what kind of day it's going to be like, the two signs I would give 5 stars to would be Sagittarius and Pisces, which is your sign. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And what I'm going to do now is look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first and only hexagram I got was 42, increase. And this hexagram doesn't move. It is locked. All the lines are static. So the fact that it is locked, I think it actually reflects what's been going on astrologically. Astrologically, there wasn't really so much happening today. The moon, it was making a trine to Neptune, it was making a sextile to Pluto, it was changing sign. But if you were listening to my readings for the 12 signs, you perhaps noticed that things were just a little bit flat, that there wasn't so much activity. I know that Sagittarians and Pisceans, it looks like being a good day for them, but not a great deal happening. And I think this is perhaps also shown by this hexagram increase. It is a nice hexagram. It's about gaining things, getting more of things. It's not just about financial increase. It might be about increase of knowledge, perhaps benefiting from our experiences, and also realizing what is valuable and what is not valuable. There is an implication with increase that in order to get something, we perhaps need to give something up. And we therefore shouldn't be too into ourselves and what we have and feel that we have to be super powerful. Greg Winkup, in his translation of increase, he suggests that it works best when we are working under someone, when we're not the person in complete control. Perhaps because there's less jealousy there, also less pressure. I mean, if we are at the absolute top, we've got everything we want, and we're completely complacent. Remembering that we've got the sun on this fixed star Betelgeuse today. You know, that's sort of about having everything and maybe losing everything. If we've got everything, we're at the absolute top. What more is there to gain? So it perhaps works best if we're at the bottom of the ladder or halfway up the ladder. Then there's scope for going up. We're not right at the top, because if we're at the top, well, the only way we can move is down. So yes, there are things we can gain, but it's not going to be very fast, and it's going to be a little bit slow and unsatisfactory. But, you know, don't panic. It's better than it could be. And to get some context for this hexagram, it's a good idea to look at the nuclear hexagram, which is the hexagram in the middle. So that's when you knock off the top and the bottom lines. So the nuclear hexagram for increase is splitting apart, and I think that might be how we perceive increase and how we regard the world around us. So splitting apart is, of course, a very negative hexagram. It's about everything falling apart. It's got the symbol of a couch where its legs have been cut off, or I don't know, maybe they've been eaten by termites. I believe that can happen in the tropics. So we may feel that we are coming from a situation where things have been really quite difficult, where things have split apart, where we've not been able to fully be ourselves, where there have been negative and destructive forces trying to bring us down, and we've got over this, and things are okay now. The situation is improving, and so that is the context for increase. We may feel that actually we've lost something recently, that we're trying to put things back in order. And given the nuclear hexagram, we can now get an idea that increase might be a little slow, might not be dramatic, but it is better for nothing. Things aren't falling apart anymore. We're starting to build, and so it's better to build and to gain, even if the gains aren't very spectacular, than to be in a state of fear and disintegration. So I think maybe with this hexagram 42 increase, it may be just a time to count our blessings. Okay, so let me now go to the astrology. And yes, it is Boris Johnson's 60th birthday, so I would like to wish Boris Johnson a happy 60th birthday. I mean, it's polite too, isn't it? I mean, whatever one thinks of him. So, looking at Boris Johnson's 60th birthday, I'm just going to look at his solar return. I'm not going to spend really any time on it at all. Here is Boris Johnson's chart. Notice he's got his sun at 2827 Gemini. And so if we do a listing of the fixed stars, I'm not quite sure if you can see this listing of the fixed stars for Boris Johnson, we can see that Boris Johnson has the sun on Betelgeuse. And remember, today the sun is on Betelgeuse. So we are talking about a Betelgeuse personality here. In fact, Boris Johnson has got a Sun-Venus conjunction on Betelgeuse. So Betelgeuse really matters for Boris Johnson. And when we looked at Vivian Robson, we had this idea of Betelgeuse really piling up the honours, being in the public eye. But the whole thing potentially crashing down. So let me just remind you of what Robson said about the sun. Honour and preferment ending in final ruin. I'm not saying that Boris Johnson has been ruined yet. I suppose it is possible. Also says acute diseases, fevers. We were reminded of Boris nearly dying of COVID, but I suppose that happened to lots of people who did not have Sun-Venus conjunction on Betelgeuse. So I do think, looking at what is happening with Boris, certainly with his political career, I think we do see evidence of Betelgeuse at work. His fall from grace was spectacular. Okay, I understand that he was basically destroyed by his own party. They didn't like what he was doing, and now I suppose the Conservative Party are paying the price. But I just take the view that his ruin and his disgrace is yet to come. I think my opinion is that in a few years' time, his involvement in Ukraine, not accepting or not ending the negotiations in Istanbul. I think the New York Times has now put out some of the documents relating to what was going on in Istanbul in April 2022. And I remember Boris went to Kiev, and that was the end of that seemed to symbolize the end of the negotiations, and it really, compared to what the situation is now, what was on the table in Istanbul in April 2022 was a pretty good deal, at least for the Ukrainians compared with now. And Boris scuppered that, or helped scupper it. He was part of the team who I think scuppered it, and a lot of people have died since then. A lot of people, hundreds of thousands, and so maybe in the end that this is relating to Boris's ruin. At the moment, of course, people in the West are completely still very much behind NATO support for Ukraine, but it could change. Things do change. Look what happened to Tony Blair. He didn't have anything on Betelgeuse, I don't think, but still, things turned against him, and he was blamed for Britain's involvement in Iraq. And a lot of people in Britain haven't forgiven him for that. Now, as far as Boris's solar return is concerned, solar return is actually quite interesting. Here is his solar return for 2024. And what we have in this solar return is a very close opposition between the Moon and Uranus. The Moon is in the 8th house, and it's opposition Uranus. Uranus is sort of moving towards Algol. So I do think that is actually quite a dangerous solar return. And look at the Sun. His Sun at 28-27 Gemini is moving to a square of Neptune. So when you've got a solar return, look at the Moon, look at the Sun. And both the Sun and the Moon are indicating big problems here. So I think Boris has to be careful. The Moon is in Scorpio because Boris has Moon at 0 degrees Scorpio, by the way. So Moon is in the same sign as Moon is in the same sign as in the solar return as it was when he was born. So I think there could be trouble. Moon in the 8th. I suppose physically he has to be a little bit careful there. But I wonder whether it will have any impact on I wonder whether Ukraine will have had any impact. It's possible, but I'm just thinking it may be a little bit too early for that. Here is his converse solar return set for 60 years before he was born, set for June the 20th, 1904. Possibly not so dramatic. We've got Jupiter rising, which is nice, but Mars is opposition Uranus. Venus is opposition Uranus. So that Mars, well, in fact, in 1904, we had Sun, Venus, and Mars all applying to an opposition of Uranus. In fact, sorry, the Sun is not applying. The Sun is just past the opposition of Uranus. But the 1904 solar return also indicates that there may be issues. We've got Uranus problems in both solar returns, and so that just might be a hint, that it might be quite a difficult year for Boris. Oh, it's not just that, is it? It's worse than that, because look at the moon. The moon is square. You're moving to a square of Uranus. Moon is square the Sun. It's going to square. Yeah, it's square Mars. It's square Venus. It's square the Sun. So yes, further evidence that I don't think it's going to necessarily be a great year for Boris, and we shouldn't forget that Boris has got these Gemini planets. Saturn is going stationary direct at 1926 at the end of the month, and Boris has his Mercury at 1919 Gemini. So Saturn is causing Boris problems. So overall, I think it's going to be a bad year for Boris. We'll see. Let me now turn to someone else who had a bad year. That is Saulos Chilima, former vice president of Malawi, who was killed in a plane crash on June the 10th. I did talk about him yesterday, but I feel that I missed the most important thing about his chart in terms of his plane crash. Saulos Chilima had a Mars square Pluto in his horoscope. So if you've got an aspect in your chart, always look for that aspect in the sky, even if it doesn't aspect your chart itself, your planets itself. So Mars square Pluto. Then look at the chart for the crash, the fatal crash. There was Mars was at 0 degrees 51 Taurus, and Pluto was at 1 degrees 47 Aquarius. So Mars and Pluto were within less than 1 degree of orb of exactitude. So Saulos Chilima, he had Mars Pluto square in his natal chart, and he died. So in other words, he was born on a Mars Pluto square, and he died on a Mars Pluto square. And looking at his solar arc directions, remember that's moving every planet 1 degree for every year of birth. So there is his directed Mars Pluto square. So there's his natal Mars Pluto square here, and then we move it on. And so look at how Mars is applying to a conjunction of the Sun. Now that's about 2 degrees off. But it's got 2 degrees to go before it makes the square with his Sun. Then look at Pluto. Pluto is beyond the Sun. It made its square to the Sun 2 years ago. In other words, the directed Mars-Pluto midpoint is exactly on his Sun, and that seems to be what killed him. So I would say that on a personal level, not considering Malawi or the chart of Malawi, on a personal level, from what I can see from his chart, I don't have his time of birth, his death was very much connected with Mars and Pluto. My main topic for today is going to be vice presidential picks. And I talked about a couple of picks yesterday, and I want to just look at a few more. One person who people are very keen on, who's a lot of Republicans think would be a good vice presidential candidate, is J.D. Vance, and he is from Ohio. So I suppose if you're thinking about Ohio, that's important state. I think that Ohio has increasingly become a red state. It used to be a purple state, but it increasingly tends to vote Republican. But I suppose having maybe J.D. Vance would help seal up Ohio. Maybe he'd be useful in terms of Pennsylvania as well. That's a state that Trump probably has to win. So here is J.D. Vance's chart, and the question is, would J.D. Vance make a good VP pick for Donald? Well, I suppose one way of looking at it is to compare his chart with Trump's chart, and so I put Donald Trump in the middle, and I have put J.D. Vance on the outer wheel. So, I mean, one good thing about the connection is that J.D. Vance has Venus at 23 degrees Leo, and Trump has his Mars at 26 degrees Leo. So it is possible that J.D. Vance's Venus can somehow moderate Trump. There is a good connection there. I think if it had been the other way round, if J.D. Vance's Mars had been on Trump's Venus, that could have been a problem, because Trump would be the one aggravating. Vance would be the one aggravating Mars rather than the other way around. So I suppose if J.D. Vance can be sort of nice and tolerant and accepting of Trump's foibles, then that might be a good thing. Though, on the other hand, Venus would represent J.D. Vance's sense of aesthetics and what's good and what's bad, and maybe that Mars is just somewhat annoying. So that is a possibility there. And J.D. Vance's Sun is at 10 Leo, right on Trump's Pluto. So I would see J.D. Vance as being more influenced by it than Trump. It's like J.D. Vance with his Sun in Leo. He's having to deal with this representative of an older generation, of the 1946 generation, who have their Pluto at around 10 Leo. And it may be a little bit overwhelming for him. That could be a problem. What could also be a problem, probably more of a problem, is J.D. Vance's Mars. J.D. Vance has his Mars at 2237 Scorpio. I mean, I don't know his time of birth, but J.D. Vance's Mars in Scorpio could be pretty aggravating for Trump. Trump has his IC at 2422 Scorpio. 2422 Scorpio represents the most private part of the horoscope. And there is Vance's Mars at 22 Scorpio. I think that there is just something about Vance that Trump could find rather annoying. I think it could be a point of real irritation there. I mean, I'm not saying that that's any reason for him not to choose J.D. Vance, but I think that there is a point where you could have a bit of a clash there. Another possible candidate, an unlikely candidate, but he's been mentioned, is this congressman from Florida called Byron Donalds. Until a few hours ago, I'd never heard of him. So here is Byron Donalds. chart set for noon, and he was born in New York. You can see he's quite young, relatively young, I suppose. He's in his 40s. I suppose Vance is quite young, though, as well. So, I mean, I suppose a lot of these candidates are quite young. So, sorry, I mean, forget that point about him being quite young. Tulsi Gabbard, she's even younger, I think. This chart has got too much stuff in Scorpio. Sun, Uranus, Venus, Mercury, Mars. That Mars in Scorpio, Mars at 26 Scorpio, I think that is a problem. It's a problem for a number of reasons. That Mars in Scorpio is square Donald Trump's Mars, which is at 26 Leo. So if you remember, Rubio and Doug Bungum, they had their Saturns at 26 fixed signs. And I thought that those Saturns hitting Trump's Mars, which is at 26 Leo, is not good. And Byron Donalds has the same issue. Mars is square Trump's ascendant. I think that would probably count him out. Though we also have to consider the fact that July, we've got a Mars-Uranus conjunction at 26 Taurus, which will be opposition Byron Donalds' Mars. So that doesn't look too good. So that is a good reason not to pick Byron Donalds. I don't think this would work. And I can't see from that chart, I don't get the idea of someone who would come over particularly well on television, or at least in a debate. I think in a debate, I'm not convinced it would work well. Maybe the Scorpio would find a way of getting through, but there's no air signs here except Pluto. And okay, I know that you can function very well as a debater if you've got no air signs. That, like with Nigel Farage, has no planets, no personal social planets in air signs. But with Farage, he's got a lot of fire. But with Byron Donalds, yeah, he's got Jupiter in Leo, but I just don't think there's enough fire to really come over in a way that would really excite and grab the attention of the American people during a debate. Then there is someone who has got a lot of fire, and that is Tulsi Gabbard. I think she's still considered a possibility to be a vice presidential pick. So I'll just quickly look at her chart. This is total fire. Mercury, Mars, Sun, Venus in Aries, plus Moon in Leo. In fact, she's got 6 planets in fire signs, and 4 of those planets are in our personal planets. So having a fiery person as your vice presidential candidate certainly has advantages. It certainly gets people's attention. She is known as being a bit of a loose cannon. She says what's on her mind. She doesn't worry too much about upsetting people. To her credit, she's one of a few American politicians who has questioned the United States' intervention in Ukraine, and J.D. Vance being another. So that fire is really working, and so that's good. Is she charismatic? Well, she is charismatic. She's got a Venus-Mars conjunction. So she has got, there's her Mars at, by the way, I don't have her time of birth, always creates problems. That there's her Mars at 20 Aries, her Venus is at 24 Aries, so she's actually got the Venus-Mars conjunction, and she's got the Sun on the Venus-Mars conjunction, and she's got Pluto opposition the Sun. So she's got Pluto on the Venus-Mars conjunction, and she's got Sun on the Venus-Mars conjunction. So Venus-Mars conjunctions, Sun on a Venus-Mars conjunctions, one thinks about charisma and attractiveness, and it does seem that a chunk of the American population are going to find her to be an attractive candidate. Now, of course, the problem with Venus-Mars and attractiveness is that it's either or. People who are very Venus-Mars, a lot of people find them attractive, but a lot of people find them unattractive. It's some people like them, some people don't like them. I think a lot of people are really going to like Tulsi Gabbard and regard her as being an attractive candidate. A lot of other people are going to find her not to be to their taste because she's got so much Aries. I mean, Aries is really in your face, and of course it's a bit unstable. I think there's a stability issue with Tulsi Gabbard. I think we've already seen this, and I think that she says she says what's on her mind, and that can be a good thing, but it can be not such a good thing. Now, looking at her connection with Donald Trump, that's always important. So yeah, Tulsi Gabbard. So we've got Donald Trump in the middle. Now, one issue which may be a problem, which I mentioned before, because I have looked at Tulsi Gabbard's chart before, is that Tulsi Gabbard has got Mercury in Aries, Mercury at 8 degrees Aries. Again, Mercury in Aries, she says what's on her mind, and Trump has got Mercury at 8 degrees Cancer. So Tulsi Gabbard's Mercury is exactly square Trump's Mercury. So Mercury square Mercury, that square is perhaps asking for trouble. That's talking about an argument, two people disagreeing with each other. She says what's on. You can imagine how it would work. She'd be talking to Donald and she'd say something and he'd be offended by it. And that's Mercury in Cancer. And he thought he'd chosen this woman as vice presidential candidate because he liked her. Maybe he found her attractive. And then she says something, and that's it. That's a real problem. Does Donald potentially find her attractive? Yeah, I think he might well do. Because there is his sun. There is Trump's sun in Gemini. And that sun in Gemini is sextile her sun in Aries. Now, all things being equal, Geminis and Aries, people who have sun in Gemini, Aries, they get on well with each other. Gemini and Aries actually make a good pair. They don't occupy the same space, but sometimes Geminis get a bit. They feel they need a spark, and Aries provides that spark. And sometimes Aries maybe needs a bit of intellectual stimulation, and Gemini can provide it. I mean, not that Donald is really a great intellectual, but the fact that they've got their sun, and in fact, I don't know exactly what time Tulsi Gabbard is born, but if you take her noon time, her sun and Donald's sun is at 22:56 Gemini, and her sun is at 22:56 Aries. So in fact, they've got an exact sun-sun sextile. And so I know they've got an exact Mercury square, but that sun-sun sextile is really powerful. And the fact that her Venus and her Mars is hitting his sun, I think there is a powerful connection there. And I do think that he finds her attractive. I think in some ways he'd like to have her as his vice presidential candidate. Whether that's politically acceptable, I don't know. Now, there is one issue here with these two people. Imagine they came together as a president and a vice president. What do you notice, or what don't you notice? There is absolutely no Earth here. Donald has no Earth in his chart, and Tulsi Gabbard has no Earth in their chart. These two people are not particularly grounded, and if you want nice, sensible government, then you perhaps wouldn't want to have Tulsi Gabbard as your vice president. Of course, if you want people who create ungrounded, chaotic excitement, then this is the perfect pair. But maybe it's not such a problem, because the United States doesn't have any Earth in its chart to speak of. Okay, it's got Neptune in Virgo, but that's a sort of generational planet. So that is kind of interesting, isn't it? The link up between Tulsi Gabbard and Donald Trump. Of all the vice presidential picks, the connections between Tulsi Gabbard and Donald Trump, I would have said, are the strongest. But that doesn't mean to say that he's going to pick her, and I believe that she's considered to be an unlikely candidate. Finally, I wanted to look at the RNC convention, very quickly. It's on July the 15th, 2024. I don't know what time the first presentation, the first talk is when it officially opens. But what I do know is that there is a Uranus-Mars conjunction on that first day. And that Uranus-Mars is going to be hitting, it will be hitting Byron, what's his name? I've forgotten his name. Byron Donalds' Mars by opposition, and it will be hitting by Marco Rubio's Saturn, and it will be hitting Doug Bungham's Saturn. So I think a lot of people are going to be perhaps a little bit unhappy here. And most importantly, that Uranus-Mars-Uranus conjunction is going to be square Trump's ascendant. And so let me just show you what I mean. No, that's whoops. So that, looking at, okay, there's Trump's chart. We just have a look at the convention chart. Okay, he's probably going to be talking not on the Friday, but probably on the, I don't know when it has, is it on the Sunday? I don't know how it works. But there is Trump's midheaven at 24 Taurus. So that Mars-Uranus conjunction is going to be very close to Trump's midheaven. I think he gets sentenced. There's his sentencing coming up as well a few days before, so that might be part of the context. And that Mars-Uranus is going to be square his Mars and square his ascendant. So there's a lot of anger here at this convention. And I think Trump is going to come over in a very angry way. We should also expect drama, I think. And we should expect drama in the world in general. So this is the context in which the Republican convention in mid-July, when Trump is formally anointed, when he chooses his VP pick, it's all very violent and stressful. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out. So that's it. Thank you very much for listening to me. If you enjoyed this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you enjoyed the video and you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.